to order. First up, if I could get a motion to allow Member Rosenbaum to participate by phone, Member Elsasser, and second by Williams. Are we going to vote electronically or voice vote on that? All right, please vote. All right, that passes. Welcome, Member Rosenbaum.
Thank you.
First up is the approval minutes from the January 6, 2026 meeting. If I get a motion. Then on floor, Member Daly and Member Renault. Are there any corrections or changes? Seeing none, please vote. That passes. Now we're on to informational items. I don't believe we have anyone here from the circuit clerk's office, the coroner's office, or PCAP. So first up would be the public defender. Welcome, Mr. Lowe.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good to see everybody again. I hope everybody had a wonderful, happy holidays. For the record, I'm Kevin Lowe from the Public Defender's Office. This is my quarterly report for the fourth quarter of 2025, so the final 3 months of 2025. As far as office news, I don't really have any significant office news to provide since we last addressed the committee. Just a few statements. I'm certainly proud of all of our attorneys and staff who work so diligently day in and day out, oftentimes under very difficult circumstances. We're proud of them. We're proud of our 2 entry-level attorneys. As I had told everybody last time, we had 2 of our 3 had passed the bar, and 2 have remained on, that passed, have remained on with our office, and I'm encouraged by their progress, slow and steady. They've made good progress so far, and proud to report that one of our attorneys, new attorneys, Randy Kurt, did her very first misdemeanor jury trial this week. So that is a great sign that she's making wonderful progress. And it, as always, and I don't know if I've said this recently, but I'm very thankful, of course, for the board's continuing support of our office. Let me just jump in real quick into our caseload data for that particular quarter. And I preface it with a few things that I always note. I know I've told all of you before, but just in case someone's tuning in for the first time, my report overall is for the fourth quarter of 2025. However, many of the statistics I'll be citing here are from the third quarter of last year. And the analysis that I do is delayed by 3 months to improve accuracy of the reporting. Because with time, it becomes more accurate. Right now, if I were to run this report for the fourth quarter, there would still be cases that have recently come in front of the courts that are just sitting there and haven't reached arraignment, haven't reached their first appearances yet, and we have no idea what their attorney's status is. And for that reason, we delay the report, delay the actual reporting of the quarter. And then also, it's not based on the raw data of cases filed, the entire amount of cases filed, rather a subtotal of all the active cases. And that's because there are a number of cases that are filed within a particular quarter that go nowhere. They just sit there, they are dismissed, or they're on warrant status, and they sit and they sit and they sit. They're not doing anything, and therefore they're inactive. So we don't report on those. We look at the active cases to determine our figures. So if we look at my report, look at the data in figure 1, it's the main table of the cases. We have select 6 categories there. The first one is the felony category. And let me say also, but as I often say, as a rule of thumb, we handle about or approximately 85% of the all active cases. If you look at quarter three for these 6 categories, it actually worked out to be exactly 85%. Of those 6 categories, a total of 828 cases were filed. Of those, 667 are active. Of those 667, we were appointed to 567, which works out to be exactly 85%. Going on into the felony statistic in that particular quarter, third quarter of 2025, 214 felony cases. Of those, only 166 are actually moving forward at the time that I ran this report a couple of weeks ago. And of those 166 active cases, the PD was appointed to 145 of them, or 87.3%. And again, that's consistent with, if you look at the same period of time the year before, in 2024, we had been appointed to 237 cases, a lot more cases during that quarter, but a clip of 89.1%. Look at the misdemeanor figures. Again, those remain fairly consistent. This particular quarter, 338 misdemeanor cases were filed. Of those, 273 are active. That's our subtotal. We were appointed to 250 of those 273 cases, or 91.6% of the cases. Juvenile delinquency, same story. It's remarkably consistent in juvenile delinquency. We receive almost all those cases. This particular quarter was 96.3% of the cases, or 52 out of 54 active cases. If you compare quarter three last year, you're looking at similar numbers to this year. Again, it points to a certain consistency in the caseloads that we look at year after year. It certainly ebbs and flows from time to time, as I've noted before, but there really are no major changes or trends that I'm able to pick up on at this point, at least with those categories. Juvenile abuse and neglect, the DCFS court, as I like to call it. People are being inappropriate parents, neglecting or abusing kids. We routinely are appointed to about 95% of the respondents in those cases. Again, I've said before, one of those cases, one JA case can have multiple respondents. Oftentimes you'll have multiple parents, putative parents. So you'll have one case, but you'll have maybe 3 respondents. So in this particular quarter, we had 52 cases filed and a total number of respondents of 104. Of those 104 respondents, those active are 76 respondents. And of the 76 active respondents, the public defender was appointed to represent 73 of those respondents, 96.1%. Figure 4 talks about detention hearings. And I wanted to point this out. If there is any type of trend, it may be happening here. If I look at our figure for figure 4, this is the total number of detention hearings handled this year. So this is not limited to the quarter 3. This is the entire year. I was able to count them all up. 2025, and they are the detention hearings held in courtroom 321 specifically. They don't tally the detention hearings that were held or pretrial fairness act hearings held in other courtrooms, and there are many in other courtrooms. It's just the way I do this, it would be very difficult, very, very time consuming for me to count them all. We had 802 in courtroom 321 for the year. I went back and compared my statistic last year, and I counted last year 702. So that number has increased by 100 over last year. But is that a possible or a potential trend? I don't know. It's too early to tell. It certainly is a lot more this year than last year. I guess we'll wait and see. I'll start counting them again and see where we're going with it. But again, it's too early to tell if that's an actual trend. As far as the pending first-degree murder cases, those stay relatively consistent as well. On January 16th, when I tabulated those, we had 47 first-degree murder cases pending in Peoria County. Of those, 2 were inactive in the sense that one was, I believe, on warrant status and the other was pending an arraignment or an attorney appearance. Of those 45 active cases, we are appointed in 28 of them, which is 62.2%. I have a rolling average there in that figure just to give a basic idea, understanding of the average of what we have pending in Peoria County. So right now, over 1, 2, 3, 4 reporting quarters or dates, we have an average of 43 cases pending in Peoria County. 40 and a half of those are 40.5 are active, and 27.3 would be assigned to the public defender on average. And then that brings me to my final figure of this report, which is something new, and it was in response to a question I got, I believe, from Steve Rickard last time I was here. He had asked about the historical progression of our numbers of attorneys in the public defender's office, and I knew we had reduced pretty significantly the number of contractors over the past 10 to 12 years, but I didn't know the exact figures. What we did is we went and looked at the historic payroll documents, and we were able to get a snapshot of each year of how many assistant public defenders were actually in Peoria County at the time. And as you can see it by this figure, and I've done two different ones, figure 7, figure 8. One's a graph, one's a bar chart. It just depends on visually what you prefer looking at. But back in 2014, so that would have been, suppose, sorry about that. Just wanted to clarify something. 2014 then would have been the last year in Tim Penn's contract, and so back then we had 32 contractors, and then you can see the progression over time as it decreases. The line on the bottom then shows full-time employees, or at least the full-time attorney employees that we picked up. You can see it increase starting with 1 in 2017, that being Judge Bach, of course, my predecessor, who was the chief public defender. In 2018, 2, that would represent me coming on board as the first assistant of the office, and it remained that way for, as you can see, several years there, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. It's just me and Judge Bach, and until very recently, when Judge Bach's last final year, and then my few years here so far, we've increased the numbers, and of course, overall dramatically increased the number of contractors we get to today where we have 8 full-time attorneys, and we have 11 contractors, or a total of 19. Okay, so and that's my report. So I hope that answers that question for Steve Ricker. I know unfortunately he's not here today, but if there are any other questions today, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions? I would just say thank you for this. You bring us probably one of the most thorough reports that I see, and I imagine a lot of time goes into this. There have been a lot of conversations regarding contractual employees and full-time employees and those counts. I'm sure Steve will look at this, and if he has any additional questions, we'll be sure to try and get those answered for him. But that is very helpful to see it in this form as opposed to the conversations when we have as 1 or 2 employees drops off. I think it's hard to visualize that as the board changes, so it's nice to see it in graph form.
Yeah.
Member Elsasser?
I'm assuming that the total outlay is less in 2026 than it was in 2014, or is that not accurate because of the full-time employees bring the outlay up because of the salaries and the benefits and things like that?
Is your question on staff count or finances?
Just finances, what the total outlay would be financially. And you weren't here in 2014, so you wouldn't know.
I don't, yeah, and I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe it's better directed towards finance, but one thing, I'm not a finance person.
Yeah.
But I think when we do, the one thing that comes to mind, at least when I think, and maybe finance can look into it, is when you look at outlay in 2014 versus today. I think it's important to take into consideration that we went through a 10-year period of I don't want to say unprecedented inflation.
Yeah, we have that
we
too.
have a lot of
Right.
inflation,
Right.
cost of living increases.
Right. Yeah, we can consider that at the time.
So maybe finance could look into that.
Yeah.
Just in dollars.
Yeah, I think we could probably make that ask, but there's going to be a lot.
I was just kind of interested. I don't have to know.
There would be a lot of variables to that too, caseload and
Yeah.
different things that would need to be considered. So, I mean, we could probably get a high level number if it's something you wanted to look at, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure what we're gaining by
Right.
putting a ton of resources into really diving into that.
mhm. So the contract attorneys, like back in 2014, when that's all we had, they only get paid when they're actually working on a case, right, per hour, or do they get paid so much, do they get paid so much per year just to be on call all the time?
Yeah, it's not per case basis. It was a contract where they, depending on which courtroom they're assigned to, they would get paid a certain amount per month or twice per month.
Okay,
It was a set amount, and they were expected to take care
okay,
of their particular assignment, which was designated by the chief public defender.
okay,
And to an extent, we still have some remnants of that system. There are 11 people that we
Right.
have with us today. We still follow that same idea.
do most of those 11 people, practice law on the side, part-time?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's one of the major distinctions is that the contractors are not full-time employees of the
Right.
county. Therefore,
Right.
they're allowed to practice law. They have private cases, they have private practices, and sometimes that can cause scheduling issues because they have their private obligation
Right.
in their private practices. And that's something that I did for many, many years. If you recall, I've said this before. I first started working with the public defender's office in 2001, sorry. And from 2001 to 2018, when I became the first assistant, so 17 years, I was a contract attorney with the public defender's office here in Peoria County. The entire time I have private practice, the entire time I was doing a contract providing public defense services for Peoria County, and just you work it out. But yes, it's difficult because you have two different schedules you're looking at. And I had to take care of my duties initially in the juvenile courtroom, which was relatively easy because it's set. You know when you have to be in court. You got to go there. You have to perform your duties during this time period and that time period. Then in 2004, 3 years later, I moved into the felony division, which is an entirely different beast. You may be in court less, but your caseload is much, much heavier.
Okay.
More serious cases. You have an ongoing obligation to many, many clients,
Right.
and you do a lot more work. It just depends on which contract you're talking about.
Yeah. So hypothetically, on one extreme, if you didn't have any cases the whole year, they would still get paid, even though they don't do anything. But on the other hand, if they'd be so busy that they didn't even have time to practice their law in their own benefit, they still get paid the same amount, right? Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
mean, hypothetically, yeah, that's an extreme hypothetical.
I mean, it's
Talking
extreme, but I
about
mean,
Peoria County,
yeah.
we don't have situations where any of our contractors for the past 12 or ever have not had work.
Well,
We
yeah,
always-
no, they have work, but do they ever get so busy that they don't even hardly have time to practice in their own private practice? Or
I don't know. I've heard complaints,
yeah,
but that's about all I can say.
okay, that's fine.
All right. I think that takes us down to resolutions. The one thing I did want to mention on informational items, it was Becky's intention from PCAPS to be here. And a tour popped up last minute, and she went ahead and did that. So just wanted to mention that she was intending to be here today, but took the tour. As far as resolutions, if I could get a motion to put the medication-assisted treatment for the recovery rollover funds and continuation grant on the floor. Member Daly and Member Renault. All right, welcome.
Thank you. So this one is a request for the approval to roll over $27,215.05 in unspent grant funding for fiscal year 25 and to accept an additional $15,000 continuation grant for the MATMAR program at the Peoria County Sheriff's Office or Peoria County Jail. Both grants were awarded through the Health Management Agency, and the funds are designated to support the continuation and initiation of medication-assisted treatment for detainees that are suffering from opioid use disorders. The initial grant was for $30,000. We received that in the fall of 2024 and had the intention of beginning spending in 2025. And as that program started up, we started with a lower interest, and that's been increasing over the year. So being able to roll over those funds and accept the new grant would allow us to continue to grow that program in the jail.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, please vote. That passes. Next up, if I could get a motion for 4.2, the Gary Sinise Foundation Grant. Member Williams and second by Member Elsasser.
This request is to accept a grant through the Gary Sinise Foundation. The foundation will provide 45 Zoll AEDs to the Sheriff's Office. These AEDs will be used to replace existing AEDs in squad cars that are nearing the end of their useful life. For this, the Sheriff's Office won't incur any cost. We'll provide the order through the company, and then the invoice will actually be sent to the foundation for them to process the payment. And then ultimately that will result in a cost avoidance for us of $52,921.25 if we were to move forward with that purchase on our own.
Are there any questions? I do have one. Does the grant cover disposable costs associated with the use of those devices?
So part of the price that is through the vendor is for them to buy back 40 of our AEDs, and that is a cost decrease for it. So those 40 AEDs will then go back to the company for them to dispose of, leaving 5 for us to use as needed.
Thank you. All right. See no additional questions, please vote. That passes. Next up, if I get a motion for the detainee telecommunications services at the Peoria County Jail. Member Daly and Member Williams.
This one is to request approval of awarding our detainee telecommunication contract to Inmate Calling Solutions following a competitive RFP. Our current contract with our vendor expires April 30th of this year. So we issued the RFP. 3 vendors responded and were evaluated by an internal team based on several criteria. And based on that, ICS was given the highest overall score for best value. That includes them providing an on-site technician that can handle both any issues with our telephone or our tablets. So that would be a huge savings in our staff time on dealing with those issues. One thing that's important to note with the telecommunications is that there's not a cost to the Sheriff's Office to provide the service. All those costs are incurred by the detainee. But there is a new SCC ruling that takes place in April of this year, April 16th, that places a cap on what detainees are allowed to be charged. And that also places a cap on what agencies are allowed to receive. So regardless of which vendor we would select, we would be subject to this new FCC ruling. And so that's something to take into account. Currently, we receive 11 cents commission, and the detainees are charged 22 cents. Under this new ruling, it's not a commission anymore. We would receive 2 cents per minute cost recovery. And then the detainees would be charged 10 cents under ICS's program. We were aware of the FCC talks of this going into place, so we did account for that when we did our fiscal year 26 budget, not knowing exactly what that looked like or when that was going to go into effect. So there will be some minor changes, but nothing major.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Member Elsasser.
So there obviously is no one from this area that does this, or we're interested, I guess.
Yeah, of the 3 vendors that responded to the RFP, one was from,
I saw they're all out of state.
yeah, they're all out of state. There was nothing that came in locally.
Okay. Okay.
All right, seeing no additional questions, please vote. That passes. Thank you, guys. All right, next up for committee action, we have a review of the executive session minutes. If I get a motion to put that on the floor. Member Daly and Member Elsasser. Turn it over to Jenny.
Yes, thank you. It's the recommendation of the state's attorney's office that all previously held minutes continue to be held because the need for confidentiality does still exist, and to go ahead and destroy the executive session audio recordings that are more than 2 years old, except for those that relate to pending litigation.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, please vote. That passes. Thank you. Is there any public comment? Miscellaneous. All right, we are adjourned.